welcome to the Lizzie Borden podcast hosted by Hub 17. Um, First off, I'd like to say that welcome you first of all to Lizzie Borden and true crime fans. This program was actually supposed to be done at Hub 17 live, along with a book signing for a book that I wrote, Inadmissible, that just came out on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Google Reads and all of these things. But I just wanted to say that because of COVID-19, I had to come up with a different way of doing this lecture series. It was part of a DCA Art Fund grant, which is funded through the Greater New York Arts Development Fund of New York City's Department of Cultural Affairs. I know that's a mouthful. So I decided to do this podcast in place of the lecture series and invite some authors that I know that have also written Lizzie Borden books. And I'm really excited and humbled to be able to put myself in that pool now of authors who have written stories about Lizzie Borden. So there are two women that I have as guests today, and they've accumulated years of studying the case and being involved in some way in the cases. And I'd like to introduce Rebecca Pittman and Shelly Dietzick. Welcome to the podcast. Yay! I'm glad you're here.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
So these ladies have written books. I'm so excited. I've read Rebecca. I read both of their books and experienced the dressing of the dressing Miss Lizzie. The little tabs that you had put on the yes. So I'm gonna let you explain that. But it brought me back to my childhood because I remember when I was a child we used to have those. So, Rebecca, tell us a little bit about your book and yeah.
It's called The History and Haunting of Lizzie Borden. And 3/4 of the book is the history of the murder trials, the case. The last quarter of the book talks about the paranormal activity going on at the murder house today. So some people are confused why it's called The History and Haunting, and that's why. But the majority of the book, it's a big book, it's 828 pages, and it's
Wow.
full of photographs. A lot of them have never been seen before. And I spent 5 years and read over 5,000 pages of trial transcripts, police reports, coroner's reports, witness statements, newspaper articles, as well as doing an experiment to find out how she broke the hatchet the way that she did. And I was very excited when we found out how she did it. And I found the gentleman that the police was seen talking to Andrew 4 days before the murders. Nobody had ever found his identity. And I was thrilled to find out who he was and how it factored into her motive for killing Abby. He did
Okay.
it.
Yeah, we're kind of losing you. Okay. So, thank you. And Shelly, tell us a little bit about your books, I should say, because you have two.
History of Oak Grove
Oh, so
with a it's about personalities in the Borden case and where they're buried and a little bio about them and also who's not buried at Oak Grove. Oak Grove is the cemetery in the north part of Fall River, where most of the distinguished citizens of the city were buried. And Lizzie's father, Andrew, and his business partner, Mr. Almy, bought lots together, nice corner lots at the front of the cemetery. And so there's a lot about that in this book. It has maps. So when you visit Fall River, you go to the cemetery and find all of the people that are mentioned in the Borden saga, and you can visit their gravesite. To me, that's as close as ever going to get to these people. And there's something really special about going to the graveside. And actually, it makes it very real to you, the story, when you can visit these personalities. My daughter, who did the illustrations for my second book, um, she and I put this out last year. Our publishing company is Hollister Press, and um, she did all of the illustrations. I became interested in the textiles involved, both forensically and just a general interest. I gave a lecture to the Costume Society of America about Lizzie's dresses, fabrics, the clothing that was taken off of the two victims and buried behind the barn, what was mentioned on the evidence list and what was not. And we could spend an hour on that alone. But that was the genesis for this book. And I got most of my information from newspaper articles. Lizzie's trial was covered every day. And in the paper, they would report what she was wearing, how she looked, her demeanor, her accessories. Kind of gives you a little window on her. And I was interested to hear that her attorney, Governor Robinson, suggested to Lizzie she should wear black. It made her look more sympathetic. And she promptly ordered two new black gowns for her trial, which she wore. So it's interesting, that aspect of it, and also textiles in the crime as well. And it's a fascinating topic.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. I think all of the topics are fascinating. When you really take a deep dive into the case, it's a little overwhelming, and that's why it takes so long to write something or study about the Lizzie Borden case. Because you could take any. Well, we tried to narrow our topics down tonight because of that very reason. Because there's so many little intricacies about the case, and you can really get lost in it for sure.
Well, to solve
But
details, I think solving the crime or getting an idea, a window on the crime, it is in the details. It's time consuming. It's a lot of trips to the library, microfilm. And then, of course, a lot of the stuff you read in the newspaper isn't accurate. So that has to be checked and rechecked with different sources. And I've been at it for 28 years, and there's still loads that I want to do. Lots of research still left to do, and other people can do too. And we'll pool our knowledge. Maybe we'll solve this thing.
so I know you were a tour guide for the Borden House for a long time, which is amazing. I've been to the house 5 times, so it's for Lizzie Borden fans. That's not a lot, but but I do enjoy it every time I go. Um, and you said that there's always new things to discover, which I agree. And let me ask you this: do you think they're holding back information just to keep fans engaged in wanting to go to the house? Like, because if the question was answered, then maybe tourists wouldn't want to go anymore because, oh, we know.
That's a good question. I've never been asked that before. The Fall River Historical Society uh, has published the Knowlton papers and a big thick volume, and it's back again in a reprint. Very interesting. They also have the Andrew Jennings, this is the defense attorney, Andrew Jennings, one of the team. They have his notes, and I understand they're working on getting those published, but there's no smoking gun there. I
Uh,
tell you, the notes I want to read are that of Lizzie's prime attorney, George Dexter Robinson. And those are under lock and key in Springfield, Massachusetts. Another law firm in the same city owns those. And no one's been able to get a look at those. And I would very much like to
well,
see
I
that.
read that went to the Supreme Court, and there was a vote, 6-3, I think, again, because They said even if you're dead, your the notes are protected or something, right?
Attorney-client privilege, yes. Hmm. But I wouldn't think after this long it would matter. I wonder if we'll ever see them. I hope so. I'm not getting any younger, so I hope it's soon.
So that might be on our bucket list, right?
It's on mine, yes.
um,
Unless you want to go with me to Springfield and crack the safe in our ninja outfits in the middle of the night, I'm with you on that one.
I'll hold the flashlight, Shelly.
so
Okay.
I love your book, and that for those of you that are watching that don't, we didn't even tell anybody what we're talking about, and basically it's the case of Lizzie Borden, who was tried and committed of a crime in 1892 of her stepmother and father, where they were both murdered. She went to trial and was acquitted. But it's an unsolved crime to a lot of people because they still think she might have had something to do with it. Or in my case, I believe she did it. So when I was looking at your book, the one dressing Miss Lizzie, and looking at the beautiful like artwork that your daughter did with the dresses, and I'm sure that you spent a lot of time going through trial transcripts and stuff to understand what Lizzie was wearing.
Well,
Kenny, can
the
we pull
news,
those two dresses up? Because that brings us to the first topic for tonight. The dress.
you're talking about the Bedford court dress?
Yes,
The one,
and the navy dress, I think that was handed into the courtroom, right?
well, the dress she gave the police, saying that that's what she wore that day, was a navy blue cotton silk, what they call bengaline dress. And that doesn't match up with what other people said she had on that morning, which was a light blue background calico with a light blue ruffle around the bottom and a little dark figure. Some said a diamond, some said clover leaf, but all, basically light blue background, dark blue print of some sort on it. And as you see, the one to the right was a navy blue bengaline. Bengaline was something very dressy. The fabric had a silk, I think a silk weft and a cotton warp. Um, and it would be something she would have worn, well, maybe somewhere like church or that. It wouldn't be the sort of dress you'd wear around the house in the morning. And that's the one she gave to the police. She said, I've washed my stockings, and her Oxford tie shoes she handed over, and what they called a skirt, which was actually an underskirt or a petticoat, the one that had a little drop of blood uh, on the petticoat. She handed those over. But then later, as we found out, she burned a dress in the stove in the kitchen, and that's pretty damaging. That was not part of the trial. That was Lizzie had really a really great legal team, and they managed to have that not considered the dress burning incident because that was the manner in which the Bordens would dispose of things that they wanted to throw away. You
How
know,
convenient.
how convenient! I
Yes.
agree. You
So
know,
what amazed me about this, looking at that dress, when I was reading about the dress, they always said, "Oh, it was a light blue dress with a dark figure on it." So I always
correct.
thought it was one little figure, like in like the part of her dress. I didn't know it was a whole pattern. So that made a huge difference because you could get blood stains on that underneath, and it wouldn't come through, right?
I'm
And it
glad you
also
said
had an extra ruffle on the bottom.
that. I actually did testing. I had 12 samples of similar fabric, light blue with some sort of figure, and navy dark blue. And at this Costume Society lecture, I invited people to point out the ones that had blood spatter on it.
Uh
I
huh.
actually spattered some of these, they were about 10 by 10 pieces of calico. and no one could find the ones that had blood spatter on them. I thought
Interesting.
it was, and I had 3 out of 12, and no one could find the ones that had blood on them because of the all over pattern
Right.
to the naked eye from a distance when you have a little repeated pattern like that.
And
And I've
these two,
often thought,
well, I was going to say, and these two dresses look so different. Like, how could you be confused about what she was wearing that day because the dresses are so different?
well, the print makes all the difference. But
Yeah.
they weren't actually dresses. I should point out this, that it was a basque, which was a basque is a word for the blouse. Another word they used was waist, and a matching skirt made out of the same fabric. This is really important because the buttons went down the front, you see, and it's very easy to get in and out of. Lizzie didn't have a dressing maid, personal maid. So this is not technically a one-piece dress. This is a
Ah,
skirt and a top made out of the same fabric. And we've actually done timing, how quickly you can change that
yeah.
uh, to another outfit, and it is under 2 minutes.
Yeah, and I did an experiment one time. I had a small lecture here at Hub 17, and I had people close their eyes for 1 minute. A
Yes.
minute's a really long time. Like, if you just sit there and just do nothing for a minute, it's a really long time. So I think she had plenty of time to change into whatever. But Rebecca, you have a whole other view of the dress theory, which just sort of blew me out of the water. If you want to like go, if you want to talk about any of that.
Well, nine days before the murders, Lizzie was in New Bedford. She was supposed to be in Marion on a vacation, and she didn't go. She got off in New Bedford. And when the police questioned the lady that owned the boarding house that Lizzie stayed in while she was there, Officer Medley said, "Was there ever a time you didn't see her? That she was out of your sight the 5 days she stayed here?" And she said there was the Saturday she was gone an hour and a half and came back with some dress material, some cheap dress material. And to me, this is what is incredible. We don't see where she went after that. She disappears for a while, suddenly pops up again the Monday before the murders. The murders were on a Thursday. She came back on a Monday. And I believe during that time, she had a special dress made from that material that was loose fitting enough to wear over another dress. And this becomes really clear during the inquest when Attorney Knowlton, he got the report from Officer Medley about the material, but he blew it. Because back then, dress goods covered a bunch of different things. It could be a pattern, it could be, you know, material threads. Women just called it dress goods. Well, he missed the word material in the report. And when he questioned Lizzie on the stand, he said, "I understand you bought a dress pattern." And I love this part because you can see her stutter. You can see her suddenly be caught off guard. And he said, "Did you buy a dress pattern while you were in New Bedford?" She goes, "Oh, yes." He goes, "Where is it?" She goes, "At home." I mean, all of a sudden her answers become just really staccato. He goes, "Where at home?" She goes, "In a trunk." He said, "In your room?" She goes, "No, in the attic." And he said, is the dress made up, meaning had the pattern been cut up and made into a dress?" And she said, "Oh, no, sir." Well, why didn't she correct him? Why did she say it wasn't a dress pattern, it was dress material? She didn't correct him. And suddenly they're tearing the house apart. They're up in the attic looking. Dress pattern became a really big deal. And a week or so later, about 2 weeks after the inquest, when the preliminary hearing started, Knowlton had already sent the police, Fleet and Medley, on 2 different trips to the house. Lizzie's in jail at this point, and tried to get it from Emma. And there's poor Emma going, what in the world am I going to do? Because the pattern that Lizzie described during the inquest was the dress, the Bedford cord that Shelly just talked about, and the pink wrapper that were made 4 months earlier in May. So if they find that pattern, they're going to know that she didn't just buy it 9 days earlier, and that it's 2 dresses that were made back in May, and that she lied. And so here's poor Emma trying to hold off the police, who are keep showing up saying, we need the dress pattern, we need to see it, until follows up and says, I demand to have it brought here. And that same day during the preliminary hearing, it showed up. He peeked inside of it and said, well, it's about what I expected. He knew he'd blown it. He didn't get another shot at Lizzie because she lawyered up. He couldn't go back. He realized he'd made a, and asked her about a pattern and not material. And now they'd had all this time. They could have gone out and bought another one and stuffed it in an envelope that matched what she talked about. So here's my question. Why did she lie? Why didn't she just correct him and say it was material? And I'll tell you why, because then he'd have said, where's the material? And she'd have to come up with this dress that was specially made. And if you listen to the witness reports, one of the policemen, Officer Doherty, and bless his heart, here's a man's description. He said it had a bosom in the waist, meaning it poofed out in the waist. All of Lizzie's dresses were made very tight. This one, and Mrs. Churchill said it had a box pleat. So it was loose fitting, it was pleated, and I believe she had it especially made to wear over the Bedford cord dress that she murdered Abby in, so that she could walk that dress right out of the house. Problem was, she didn't realize they were going to suspect her. And when you start seeing during the murder day how fast she realized this is not going right, they're not going away. They're not taking the bodies away. They're not out looking for a maniac. Why do they keep coming in my room asking me all these questions? And she kept that dress on for 3 days. Even the police testified that she kept that same dress on for 3 days. And my last point
Are you talking about the Bedford cord or another
both.
dress? Totally, both. So you're
There
saying
was nowhere to put it. They searched that
so
house
Shelly,
up and down 5 searches.
So I'm gonna have Shelly, respond to this, because those dresses are really made snug. So is it possible she could have wore a dress under that? Another one?
Well, anything is possible. Yeah,
Right.
it's what I found interesting. Right after the body of Abby Borden was found, around 11:30 ish, the day of the murders, Lizzie immediately goes up to her bedroom. No one told her go upstairs. She went upstairs and went in Emma's room. There's a very shallow closet in there, and took out a pink and white striped wrapper with cherry red ribbons. That is also in the little paper doll book, and put that on. And
Yeah, I think we have a picture of that too. Yeah.
yeah, and she remains in that. Now, a wrapper is something akin to sort of a house coat. You wouldn't wear it in front of strangers, only maybe your family or girlfriends or something like that who come to visit, or if you were sick and you were in your room in bed and not well. And whether she thought that made her look more feminine and um, would maybe prevent the police from really haranguing her that day. Plus, she had Dr. Bowen, the family doctor, and her minister supporting her in this. Lizzie, the shocked, um, you know, um, well, she wasn't an invalid, but delicate. And they didn't push her too hard that day. It made a nice vignette. she in her pink and white wrapper with the minister there, and
Yeah.
Dr. Bowen giving her bromocaffeine for her nerves. But she does say, uh, I wish we had more testimony from Lizzie. She only takes the stand for the inquest because
Right.
Robinson thinks she wouldn't have held up too well, you
So hold
know.
that thought a minute. We're going to ask our first question for the night. So people, what we're doing, we're going to ask some questions throughout this podcast, and you can type in the chat your answer if you think you know it, and we're going to be giving out one of Rebecca's books, one of my books, and one of Shelly's books. So at the end, we're
I
going to have
for you.
what's that?
I
Oh,
have both
Rebecca's
books for you.
game. Rebecca's card game. I forgot about that. We're giving out
Yes.
Rebecca's card game, Shelly's book, and my book. All right. So when you answer the question, I have a person that's going to take your name, and we're going to throw your name for a drawing, and at the end, we're going to draw the names. So the first question is, whose inquest testimony went missing? Is it A, Bridget Sullivan, B, Lizzie Borden and Bridget Sullivan, or C, Lizzie Borden? Whose inquest testimony went missing? So that's the question. So you're just going to write A, B, or C on as your answer. It's A, Bridget Sullivan, B, Lizzie Borden and Bridget Sullivan, or C, Lizzie Borden. And I know we all know this, but and you're going to type your answer in the comments. All right? You're going to type your answers in the comments. And we're going to write your name down. Whether it's right or wrong, you're going to get credit. We're going to throw your name into a drawing. All right. So, getting back to the dress, I just, wow, Larry, you're going to be busy writing. Good going, guys. And we'll answer the questions at the end of the podcast for you, so you know. Rebecca, so are you telling me that she burnt two dresses? Like it was I'm trying to get this. It was a combo dress, right? But did she burn two dresses? Like did she rip up all of those parts and burn them?
Here's the thing. First of all, if you notice, they came Saturday night to tell her, well, she made them tell her. She said they came to say, please stay in the house because the mobs outside were so bad.
Right.
And she said, is someone here suspected? And she hounded them until they said, well, we hate to say this, but yes, you were suspected. Don't you find that interesting that it's the very next morning on Sunday morning she burns the Bedford cord dress?
Oh, absolutely. It was definitely guilty, but did she was guilty of doing that, but what did she burn
Okay.
exactly? Uh-oh. There you go.
I'm sorry.
That's
So,
all right.
yes, what I believe she did, because the leg of mutton sleeves back then were big, they were huge. You couldn't have fit another dress over a dress with the leg of mutton sleeves like the Bedford cord had. I believe she ripped the sleeves off and the bottom hem in order to wear another dress over that one. I think she crammed the sleeves and the hem into a little pillowcase thing that was crammed into. I think that could have been the package that was the bundle that was seen on the floor that Alice Russell reported seeing the policeman kick it. And
Was that
when he
in
was
Emma's
trying to cut,
closet? The
Yes.
bundle
well, that's
in
where
Emma's
she was
closet.
changed her clothes.
Okay.
If it's like Shelly said, she went into Emma's room to change into the pink wrapper, and there was a
Got ya.
suspicious looking bundle sitting there. But anyway, when Alice Russell came into the kitchen and saw Lizzie burning the dress, she said, quote, I saw her pulling down or ripping down pieces out of the cupboard of the dress. Why were they in pieces? She burnt the whole skirt in one piece. Why would she tear apart the blouse part to burn it when she stuffed an entire skirt in there? I think those were the pieces that she tore off in order for that other dress to fit over it. And do I think she burned 2 dresses? I think she must have gotten rid of the one she had specially made, because that's not the one she turned over to the police.
Right.
Everyone except the Bowens said that's not the dress she had on that day. So I believe there were 3 dresses.
Interesting. And I found it interesting. Oh, and by the way, if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat and we'll be happy to answer your questions if we can. What I find interesting is that light blue Bedford cord is the only dress that I think had a ruffle on the bottom that she ever had made with a extra inch or 2 inches, that ruffle on the
Right.
bottom. Is that true?
Yeah, the dressmaker said that that one was made a little longer than what she usually had made.
Is
Right,
there any
Shelly?
reason she would do that?
Well, actually, Bridget Sullivan, who did all the laundry in the house, also described that ruffle on that particular dress, you
Aha.
know, as well. So we have Bridget's word. Bridget knew the girl's clothes. Lizzie only
So so
ironed her hand.
what do you think she put in her slop bucket when the police were searching her room the day of the murders? They came and they insisted, Fleet insisted on searching her room, and they came in, but they never looked in the slop bucket. So do you think she hid anything in that bucket also? To Because I always thought maybe there were towels in there that she put in there. Uh,
It was
Maybe.
that time of the month for Lizzie, and she had finished on Wednesday, she said. But there were little towelettes that were used for feminine hygiene product long before we had what great stuff we have today. And those would be washed out and reused. My grandmother told me about this. And I'm sure there was a pail probably with used ones in the room. I've
Yeah.
seen a slop pail, and if you look at a Victorian slop pail for measurement, it really held quite a bit. I've actually put a hatchet in a slop pail. It's actually tall. It has a handle and a lid on it. And later, as you know, in the sink room in the cellar, um, Bridget said, I didn't see that slop pail full of feminine napkins before, but it's going to show up later. I think no policeman would have considered searching something like that. When you study this case, it's absolutely paramount. You approach it from the mindset of the era um, to make sense of certain behaviors. And gentlemen, when Lizzie said, "I'm if you search my room and I'm upset too much, it will make me ill," and of course the
Yeah.
policeman yielded to her. That is just the culture of the era. And this whole case, always, you can never lose sight over what would go now, would never have been the case in 1892. And
Yeah.
the and
So
everything affected by that.
So, Shelly, the reason I asked the question about the slop bucket is I think she hid, I think she wore an apron also, maybe in those murders, because there was an extra apron found um,
And,
in the basement on the clothing pile. Like there were
and
two
yeah,
aprons.
right. And I wonder who wore the other one. When you see the picture of Abby on her stomach on the floor, it doesn't appear that she's got an apron on because you could see the tie in the back. It looks like she has, a skirt. She had tied her hair up in some little scarf when she was dusting. But yeah, that second apron has always bothered me. Also, the evidence list does not include Andrew Borden's frock coat. And
Right.
I thought a lot of stuff is missing, and
Well,
you wonder,
his whole clothing is missing, right? His pants, everything is missing. And
I
they
was
also
studying.
found, well, they found the extra apron in the pile of clothing they put in the ground like a stew. And his Prince Albert coat was missing, his pants, but didn't they also find 3 towelettes on that pile too?
Well, I'm
Well,
thinking
here,
they might have been when the stones were removed. and the Dr. Dolan had removed. Those might have been used for the men, the doctor, to clean his hands with, and since it would have
Okay.
had blood, too, I can account for those little towelettes. They had to wash their hands with something, because what they did was really
Oh,
gory. So
I know we're getting
Well,
off the sidetrack, but do you think those this is what happens. So do you think those towelettes, you said maybe used from the doctors, was that upstairs after they were like cleaning their hands after the inspection of Abby's body? Because they found blood in the basin upstairs.
yes, correct.
But Bridget
Possibly,
testified that the doctors washed their hands in the kitchen.
but they would dry
well,
their
in the
hands.
2 aprons, yeah, I believe the 2 aprons could have been used during the partial autopsies. They may have
I
asked Bridget to bring them aprons while they're doing the partial autopsies on the two bodies to protect their clothes.
problem I have with that, Rebecca, is I don't know that a man would put a lady's apron on. I have a little problem.
Even to
Okay,
protect your suit.
so we had a comment from David Wolf and said, I think she may have killed her father using his wool coat in reverse, um, like, and then it was under his head. I don't see that, but using his Andrews, I guess his coat in reverse to cover up, I guess
Yeah.
Lizzie's body. Is that what you're saying, David?
Well, no, that she wore it to commit the crime, and we've tried that. That's an old theory, by the way. Many people have speculated. There's a whole legend around the frock coat. Was it the frock coat on the arm of the sofa? Mr. Borden usually hung it up in the dining room cupboard, but they find a frock coat over the arm of the sofa. Maybe he hadn't had a chance to hang it up yet, or he forgot to do it. Who knows? There's so many unanswered questions because the forensics weren't done properly. Things were overlooked. The family was allowed to stay in the house. Today, I think this whole case would have been solved in 30 minutes or less. Um, you
Well, they
know,
did find that coat rolled up in a ball under his head, Andrew's head, right?
well, it was under his
Yes.
head. There was a pillow and a doily, and those things are mentioned on the evidence list.
And
The
his
the
coat
pillow,
though, too, right?
well, the coat,
Yes.
a lot of blood on it because it was the arm of the sofa kind of extended toward the dining room door, the one that's closest to the front hall. There was a coat over the arm. There was also a pillow and a doily, and he was sort of sprawled out, leaning against the arm. Um,
Oh, for some reason
and
I thought it was rolled under his head, like rolled up in like a ball or something under his head.
I would
I don't
It
say,
know. I
was
have to look at the
folded.
picture again.
yeah, look at the
Yeah, it
picture.
was folded up under his head. Andrew
Better.
was 6 feet tall, and Lizzie was 5'4". And I believe she did put that coat on, which explains why when she was seen only 10 minutes later, there was no blood on her. I don't
Well,
know that she necessarily had to wear it backwards. She
It
could have
totally makes
buttoned it up
sense
and
to
even
me.
pulled the collar up.
I'll
What?
tell you, having put a frock coat on and trying to wield a hatchet, it's not as easy as you think, especially if the coat is too large for you. I'm not saying, I mean, it's a good theory. It's possible. It could explain a lot of things. Too bad they didn't look at the coat, lay it out like we would today, look at splatter and
Yeah,
all of that.
that's a
It
I
good
might have been,
actually
point.
love that theory, though. I do, because that totally makes sense to me. Like if she would get away with the murder,
what I want to
Well,
know
look
is
how
what happened.
brilliant it is.
and
Now,
you're
if you
forgetting the
find blood
coat
on
went
the coat,
missing, and the lawyers got paid a lot of money. Like people got paid a lot of money over that course of that trial. So maybe someone made that go missing.
Well,
I
the
don't know,
story.
but if you look at it, it's rather brilliant. If you had worn it to kill someone, how brilliant is that to then fold it up, put it under his head, because now if blood is found on it, it's because of the wounds leaking on it. I mean, if that is what she did, it was brilliant.
It reminds me of the Alfred Hitchcock show where a lady kills her husband with a frozen leg of lamb, then she cooks it in the oven and feeds
Yes.
it to. Yeah, I love that one. It's a good theory, but Why isn't that frock coat on the original evidence list of stuff, that was found in the pile in the basement? Later on, someone's referred to it. Did they have it cleaned and bury him in it? Story was that Andrew
I don't
Borden
know.
only one good frock coat, that he wore all the time. Like Uncle John had one suit that he wore until it practically fell off. And when his shirt got
Right.
dirty, he bought a new one, bachelor living, I guess. But I've often wondered, did they have that cleaned? Did Mr. Windward, the undertaker, did Lizzie say, you need to go buy my father a new frock coat?
Mm,
There's a lot around that garment. There's a lot of unanswered questions about many aspects of this. You can't always believe the newspapers, and
right.
Mhm.
question. And some
Well,
things I don't
Well,
think were.
and then there's the lock he brought home. We never hear about it again.
No,
That
that's
big
true.
old
I
broken
like that,
lock.
Omar.
Where did it go?
Great.
So anyway,
I agree, Omar. That's so true. There is actually an Alfred Hitchcock episode of the Lizzie Borden case. Have you ever seen that one? I forget what it's called, but it's really good.
Called older sister,
Oh,
or
the
is
older
it
sister. Yes, the older sister. I think it's called. What
got a
an
real twist?
awesome! It's really
Yeah.
good.
Mhm.
So, okay, so we're into this dress, this whole dress thing. So we're looking at it. Okay, um, but what makes it so interesting and possible is the fact that she tried, and we all suspect that she tried to poison Andrew and Abby before the murders even happened. And Rebecca came out in her book and talked about this attempted poisoning. We know of the two, which, well, I know of the one specifically, which was the Eve that she went to Eli Bentz's pharmacy and tried to purchase the prussic acid. But I'm not sure about the other few that you were talking about, and the attempts at purchasing arsenic also. But
well, it's
Well,
a new
one,
theory in my
oh,
book, and I'll admit no one has put the theory forth before. But everyone thought that Abby and Andrew were going to be at the farm. In fact, Andrew was stopped in town and said, "I thought you were going to be at the farmhouse." That's where they went every August. They were supposed to be there, and I think Lizzie believed they were going to be there. And I think she put arsenic in the milk can that would have been waiting for them at the farmhouse that Monday, but they changed their mind and didn't go. So what's suspicious to me is suddenly the two farm hands out there get really super sick. And I'm not the only one who thought it, because in the newspaper reports, the poison started circulating and the police went out there to check on it. And Mr. Eddy, one of the farm hands, said that Andrew had sent John Morris to ask him how he was feeling. And it's interesting to me that when John Morse got on the stand, he completely lied and said, "No, he didn't. I didn't go out there and ask how he was feeling. I just went to get some eggs." Why would he distance himself from something as innocuous as asking a man how he was feeling? So I do think it's a possibility that Lizzie put the poison in the milk there, but they didn't go. So I think she put it in their milk Tuesday night at home, and everyone got sick except her. But
Tuesday night,
Bridget got sick, and yeah,
but they
2 nights
tested the
before the
milk.
murders.
I think they tested the wrong milk though. I think they tested Wednesday and
Yeah,
Thursday's milk, not right. They
right.
when they were
exactly.
doing the forensic, they tested the wrong milk. I think.
They tested the wrong milk. And yet you hear Bridget's testimony say, "I know that there wasn't anything wrong with it because I drank the last of it." Well, how do you send off Wednesdays and Thursdays if she drank the last of it? I think she drank the last of Tuesdays. And I think and she got sick Thursday morning. And I believe it was a part of a milk bottle toward the back of the refrigerator that still had some of Tuesday's milk in it, because she ends up getting sick. So, anyway,
Well,
yes,
Okay,
it's a new theory.
uh, okay, hold that thought a minute, and I'll let you go, Shelly. Our next question is: what in Alice Russell's inquest testimony determined whether there was going to be a trial? Was it A, She found a bat underneath the Borden bed. B, she saw Lizzie burn a dress. Or C, she just thought Lizzie was guilty. The question is, what in Alice Russell's inquest testimony determined whether there was going to be a trial? A, she found a bat under the Borden's bed. B, she saw Lizzie burn a dress. And C, she thought Lizzie was guilty. So you can go ahead and put your answers in the comments. Okay, let's continue, Shelly. Oh, we have a question. How did they know which milk is Tuesdays or any other day? The label? That's a good question.
No, fresh milk was delivered every morning from the Borden barn at 4:45. And so they can only drink so much milk. So every day a fresh thing came. Tuesday had new milk, Wednesday had new milk, Thursday had new milk. Everybody was sick Wednesday, and there wasn't a whole lot of milk being drank. They were making Andrew tea, especially on Wednesday, because he was really sick. So there's this leftover milk, and I'm wondering if Bridget didn't have to, in order to keep putting new bottles of milk in the icebox to have room for it, poured out a few of the bottles. There might have been a little of Tuesday's left over. But fresh milk was delivered every day in a can out on the back porch.
Okay, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I was about to mention there was another mention, and this was on Pleasant Street, which is the house. A pharmacist named Hippolyte Martel on Pleasant said someone looked like Lizzie had come to try to procure arsenic. This is a couple of weeks before the murders. And that was investigated. And they ran down wife of one of the policemen who had a resentment, who was going into different pharmacies, I guess on behalf of the police, to see how easy it would be, for someone walking in to be able to procure a poison. But there for a little bit, it looked kind of bad for Lizzie, because this Mr. Martel said someone looking like Lizzie had come in. But they did finally backtrack and find out that it was the wife of a officer, a policeman. But so we've heard that before. They got sick Tuesday night. At the time, there was something called summer complaint. And without good refrigeration, it was quite common for farmers and people in rural areas who didn't have good refrigeration to have spoiled food, not to the point of salmonella or ptomaine poisoning or something, botulism, nothing like that, but just to give you the symptoms of upset stomach and that sort of thing. And they had swordfish steak on Tuesday night, and the Bordens were ill from that. And Abby was in pretty bad shape, actually. She went early in the morning, the following morning, to see Dr. Bowen across the street, and said that she thought that she'd been poisoned, and related a story about a family she knew who had gotten sick that way from eating cream cakes, that the cream had soured, and they, maybe it was that. And so we hear a lot about poisoning, and you're not sure if they're talking about, was this just this summer complaint that was so prevalent, or was it something more sinister? And
right, because back in the 1800s too, I read like they put a lot of things in food to preserve it. I know that in milk, to make it, to preserve it, didn't they put boric acid in it sometimes? And we use that to kill roaches these days. So I was like astounded. I think anyone would get upset stomachs, right? And also in the bread, they put alum in bread to make it whiter because they believed in purity and all of that. So there was a lot of kitchen items that could really make you sick.
Or you could just boil fly papers and get arsenic easily that way. A Victorian home was a hotbed of poisonous possibilities.
Right. And Rebecca, you talk in your book about paint. Back then, paint just the fumes alone could kill you, because sometimes, especially outdoor paint, they put in what's a preservative that to preserve it. I forget what it's called, but I know in the green paint, there's arsenic in that also to make it
Yeah,
that
they would
green
add,
color.
to get the verdigris, they would add arsenic to the copper to
Yeah,
produce the green. And back then, people were dying from the emerald dye. It became the color to have, was this emerald green, and ball gowns were dyed in it. And women were dying. They were absorbing this arsenic through they'd be sweaty and dancing at a ball or whatever, and their
right.
skin would absorb the arsenic. It was in flocking on wallpaper. I mean, like Shelly said, it was a plethora of things gone wrong back then. And, but yeah, it happened a lot.
And it's amazing. I think Emma owned a green dress. Just saying.
Yeah. Yes, you did.
Well,
So
there's
so
there's a way. Yeah.
well, so far we have the dress theory, and we have the poison theory. Like, to couple together all of these. I guess, like, when you start to study the Lizzie Borden case, you realize all of these things together point to murder, or an attempted murder, or circumstantial evidence. And it's one of the reasons I wrote my book, because my book is called Inadmissible, which is all the things that were left out of the trial that could have pushed it forward to build a circumstantial case against Lizzie, more so than there was a lot of things missing out of the trial. And even in life, like, what were you saying, Shelly?
Well, she got lucky and she had a darn good dream team. You know,
Right.
George Robinson had been a former governor, and he was kind of the it guy. What was O.J. Simpson's Johnny Cochran? Okay,
Yes.
Robinson
Yes.
Yes.
Cochran of the time. He actually went to the jail before he agreed to take the case. He went to Taunton, where Lizzie spent, was it almost 10 months before her trial started, and had a 3-hour interview. This is something I've just learned recently doing research on her lawyer, Mr. Robinson. And before he'd, take the case, he did an in-depth interview with Lizzie and figured he could probably get her off after he interviewed her, got a grip on her personality, her character. Would she be good under pressure on the stand? He was just, a superb lawyer. The fact that her inquest testimony was not allowed, the dress burning incident was not allowed, and although at the preliminary, the prussic acid testimony by Eli Bentz was allowed, it didn't get as far as the trial. The jurors could not take that into consideration.
Well,
And even witness, he was a good witness,
and
in
also,
my
Well, he
like,
appointed the judge.
what was
I mean,
that?
the judge that ruled over the Superior Court trial was at one time appointed by George
Right.
Robinson, correct?
Exactly.
Shelley? Yeah, I mean, and he basically almost in his charge to the jury at the end almost told them to let her go. The newspapers the next day said that he did more for the defense than anybody else with his charge to the jury.
yeah, it was a humdinger, and even believe that she could have done such a heinous crime. She must be a fiend. And I ask you, gentlemen, does she look like a fiend? Oh, I wish I had a recording. When you read the written word, you don't get the tone of voice. I'd give anything to be a fly on the wall in that courtroom and
Right.
actually
Yeah.
hear the voices, Lizzie's voice, Robinson, Jennings, all of these people. What you miss so much by not hearing.
Well, Shelley, you actually were in the courtroom, though. I watched a little video that you did of your visit to the courtroom where they had the trial. I love it. If anyone gets a chance, go on to, is it on Wharfs? Is it on
It's
your,
it's on Lizzie Borden Warps and Wefts, and also
okay.
I have the YouTube channel or the Facebook page. It's on both.
Okay. You should check them out, because she has done some videos which are, they you takes you on a little tour through the town, at the court, and it gives you an idea of what it was really like to be there. So getting to our next question, or our next question for our attendees. Okay, this one will sort of bring up the next discussion that we're going to have, because it's sort of a take that I have on the Lizzie Borden trial. So the next question is, Andrew Borden married Abby Durfee Gray 2 years after his first wife Sarah's death. All right. How old was Abby when they got married? Was Abby 27, 37, or 47? How old was Abby when she married Andrew Borden? Was she 27, 37, or 47? And the reason I'm asking this question, and you can put your answers in the comments, is because at the time of Andrew's and Abby's wedding, Abby was taking care of her mother, who died from consumption, which was pretty common back then. Only 17 months after her mother's death, Oliver Gray remarried a woman who was 25 years younger than him. And Abby now lived in a household with a stepmother who was a mere 1 year older than she, and a new half-sister that was 36 years younger than her. So the marriage to Andrew would move her out of an uncomfortable situation into a new one, which included money and comfort. So I don't think that Abby and Andrew got married out of love. I think it was more out of convenience. Abby wanted out, and Andrew needed somebody to take care of the girls. And, you know, we've always spoken about the conflict between Abby Borden and the two Borden sisters. Like, there was always some, you know, tension between them. And this was in my book. I took a whole stance on women's rights and the suffrage movement and that whole idea of women in power. I found out that, and you probably know this, Mary Livermore was a friend of Sarah Borden, Lizzie and Emma's mother. They were friends. So later in life, Mary Livermore was a real, known as a woman's suffrage, doing the women's rights movement. Is she the one that was in charge of the Women's Home Journal? Is that the woman I'm talking? There's two women. One that started the Women's Home Journal. And then she was the friend of Sarah. I think her name was Mary Livermore. We can look that up. If anyone's chatting wants to Google that, please. So, but she was fighting for the women's suffrage movement back then, and it was a big thing. In fact, during the whole time Lizzie was growing up, you know, there was a movement for women's rights. And Lizzie was a reader. I think she was very intelligent. And after her acquittal, she had a lot of friends in high places, a lot of friends. Her own cousin, Mrs. Howe, her name was, her cousin.
Grace Hartley Howe.
Yes, was married to President D. Roosevelt's, her husband.
Right. Louis B. Howe. Mm-hmm.
Yes, her husband was under the President Roosevelt's, he was a friend of his. And
he was
Secretary of State or something like that. So anyway, what I'm getting at is Lizzie knew a lot of people in high places with money and women with power. So why wouldn't she be a woman that wants that and knows about it and has known about it? And the reason I bring back to Sarah is because Sarah was among those people. So let's say Sarah was that, and when Emma was growing up, she picked some of that up from her mother. So the girls wanted independence. They wanted to be that too. And then when Abby moved in, she was a woman of the the normal norms of the way women are supposed to act, ergo the conflict in the house between all of them. Because Abby was the typical Victorian woman where the girls maybe were more advanced and wanted more modern to be the new woman, so to speak. Thoughts?
That's interesting.
That's an
Yeah,
interesting insight.
it is.
I hadn't really looked at it that way.
Well,
You've also got, I know there's a lot of things that were going on too. I mean, the Jack the Ripper murders were only 4 years before the Borden murders and making headlines. And I often wondered if that wasn't an impetus for Lizzie to think of how, to maybe make it look like a maniac had slain these two people. That's off topic of what you were just saying, but there was an awful lot going on at that time.
I was going to say, I like that idea about independence. A lot of women didn't have a choice. They had to get married or they'd be their father's daughter forever. And Lizzie volunteered a lot, which gave her an entree in society, especially at the Rock Street Congregational Church. She moved in the circle of what I call, there were the have and the have not Bordens. They were the uber wealthy Bordens, like Richard Borden, Jefferson Borden, the mill owners. And she mixed with them. They were related somewhat distantly. I think they shared a great great grandfather. But it put her in a circle of women who didn't have to get married. They were wealthy. And, if they wanted to, well, that's fine, but they didn't have to. They all go to Europe in 1890. She goes with
Yes.
some very young girls, and that gave her a taste of freedom, independence, and she saw these wealthy girls that didn't have to get married and lead that kind of life to be dominated by man like her father, kept on a leash financially. And I'm sure the idea crossed her mind, well, if I had my inheritance, I would have a whole different lifestyle. It would be much more fun than what I'm doing now. So that is a good point to consider. I mean, you need motive, weapon, opportunity. The motive is the driving force. What was the motive? Was it break free of wanting to be independent and live her own life? And once she got the money, she certainly did exactly what she wanted to do at that point.
She
Lived
did,
where
and
she
look who
wanted.
she left the money to, Mary Howe, right?
Other, yes, other women.
And liver was it Livermore, the animal, it was her other friend. I think it was Mary Livermore. I always get those two confused because I think they're both Marys.
Yeah, Helen Layton got
Oh,
Lizzie.
okay.
Helen Layton in animal welfare.
Right,
And
okay. Well, those
left
two
money.
women.
Yeah. And also Grace Hartley Howell was a woman, ahead of,
She
and
was an
what is
amazing woman.
she was Fall River's first postmistress in
Yes.
a they were always men. So yeah, Lizzie had for a lot of strong female independent women, and it maybe gave her ideas. It would give me ideas.
I absolutely think they did. I really think because she read, when I was reading back then, a woman could be put away for even reading novels, like in
Her
an
husband
asylum. I
a
have
lot
a
of
whole chapter devoted to asylums and what women could be put away for. And it was just striking, like very scary. Like if you even breathe the wrong way, you could be put in a workhouse. It was like,
yeah, was the husband's signature and a doctor, and they could put you in Taunton Asylum. And Lizzie,
yeah,
when she was in jail, was so despondent and melancholy. She said, they may as well, take me down the street. So I went out there to see how close the asylum was to her jail. It's a block away,
right.
you know. Yeah. So,
I
uh,
read somewhere that Lizzie spent a day or two at the asylum to be checked out by a doctor there. Have you heard
they
any
did
rumors of that?
well. It was called the Molten Batchelder investigation, where they gathered interviews with people who knew Lizzie to determine her sanity and her ability to stand questioning and trial setting. And it was decided that she was competent to testify, give answers, that there was the whole story of Eliza Borden came up because of this. There had been Lizzie's great uncle Ludwig had a wife who committed suicide after she threw three children in a cistern trying to drown them. And this, we only know about it because it came up during, Lizzie's trial. And when she was examined by Moulton Batchelder to determine if she were sane, and people were questioned. And I forget who said, well, the Morses were always peculiar people, but no, they weren't insane. And then this Mrs. Ladwick Borden, Eliza, the children in the well. I have an article on my
Wow.
website.
And
So,
and
they
that's
wanted,
an incredible story too. Like,
oh
Shelly,
yeah,
you should talk about that because again, it's about a woman oppressed, maybe. Like, why? And that's the other reason I added other murderous women to the story, because I wanted to make
oh,
a correlation of why all of these women killed, and they were all like comparatively in the same type of situation in a patriarchal society, oppressed, and
press.
they were alcoholics, or it turned them. It would make any woman crazy, really, when you think about it.
Why do you bring this up? I'm working on a story now about a similar case to Mrs. Ladwick Borden. And a lot of the times, these women had baby after baby after baby. And what we're talking about was called
Yes.
melancholia then, but it was postpartum depression. And men didn't understand it. There's a famous Hopewell Sanitarium in Bristol, which is very
Hmm.
close. And I got some of their records, working on this other story, which is similar. And the treatment, the things they use, snap them out of the melancholia. Oh, they're hysterical. And yeah, this was I when I mentioned you have to look at this through the lens of the era. Um,
Yes, I would be
yeah,
fascinated with that book. I really want to
Well,
do it. Yeah, because
they
uh,
were
yeah, a lot.
they
I
were
think
passing out laudanum like aspirin back then. I mean, you could get laudanum over the counter, and women were buying it. You get the impression half the time they were hopped up on drugs.
oh,
Um,
and all kinds of stuff to improve the mood. So the husband wasn't
yes.
put. This one woman that I'm working on now, this case, very similar to Mrs. Borden's case, she actually wrote an apology to her husband before she did the deed, and apologized that she had put him through such a terrible time, and she felt ashamed, and he deserved better. It was all about the man, not inconveniencing
Hmm.
him, being a burden to him. And these women, often, more often than I ever knew, committed suicide, and sometimes they took their children with them. I have found 3 cases in the last year within a 20-mile radius, and I think it's even more prolific than that. It's scary stuff.
wow.
And I don't think Lizzie wanted life like that under the thumb.
Did you now? Did you guys ever think that? And I thought this after reading about the workhouses, the asylums, and the oppression, and the many women, even women that were in jail that wrote letters saying how their husbands were their masters, and like things like that. But did you ever think for a minute that maybe, and it's a possibility, this is out there in left field, Andrew wanted, he was thinking maybe of committing Lizzie? Because if you look at the evidence of all the letters written and the people making comments about her life, even as a child, they said she had moods. She was miserable. She was depressed. And even in the later years, women that wrote comments about her in newspaper articles or whatever said that, she was miserable. She wasn't happy. Although she would in Maplecroft have these rip roaring parties all night and then be depressed. Was she maybe bipolar, and maybe Andrew sensed that? Was there ever a thing that maybe they wanted to commit her, or she knew that she could have been committed. This is why she didn't fit in with the women's clubs. She wanted to, but they always thought she was peculiar. That came up many times. So is it because she had some kind of mental illness, and then she was trying to cover it up?
Well, Victoria Lincoln wrote a book called Private Disgrace. And her whole theory was that Lizzie had temporal lobe epilepsy and had seizures. And she committed both the murders and didn't realize that she had done it. And
Mm,
went into what do they call it? A fugue state, like a
yeah,
blackout. And the problem with that is you wouldn't kill someone around 9:30 in the morning in a blackout state, be perfectly normal for another hour, and then have a repeat. That's not how temporal lobe epilepsy works.
right,
But it
right.
was an interesting, and and I thought, where did Victoria Lincoln get the idea that this could be a possibility that Lizzie might have epilepsy? And it's certainly something to consider. Many said she was peculiar. Parallel Lives talk about um, some of Lizzie's friends that said she had a nasty streak sometimes. Once
Yeah,
Lizzie was sick, and I think the little girl's name was Luli. I think it was one of the Holmes girls. Went to
yeah,
visit Lizzie. It was nasty as could be, and she said, "I'm not going to go back to see her." So bipolar is a good possibility. Sure,
yeah.
a lot of
That's what I'm thinking, bipolar, because the moods were so dramatic, and they really didn't have a word for it, and peculiar was used a lot in describing her. And even her mother, people said that her mother was like that also, peculiar and had a mean streak. But this
all
is
the
all hearsay with neighbors doing interviews and writing letters and making comments.
mhm.
But if you count down, if you will, you can see her becoming more and more unhinged. There was the European trip Andrew may have hoped would satisfy her, because I think he felt that all she did was complain about the house and her lifestyle. So she goes on this expensive European grand tour, but when she comes back, look what happens. Emma switches rooms with her. Emma had the big room, and she gave her room to Lizzie and took one half the size. You get the impression that when Lizzie got back, it was worse than ever, because now she'd seen what the rich Bordens had. She'd had a taste of it. She's back in that house that she hates. The year before, Abby's dresser's broken into. They did point it back to Lizzie when they found out she's the one that sold the horse car tickets that were stolen. You can see this unhinging happening, and like the family is tiptoeing around her.
Yeah.
And
So
everything's to locks appear on everything, drawers, doors.
Yes,
The
so
break-in
our
is
next
important.
it's the house
question.
of locks.
Okay, so our next question, Kelly Hall, oppression makes people, okay, do some strange things. Yes, yes, it does. You would think. Murder? Does it make them do murder, Kelly? It's like, okay, so our next question is, what was the nickname for arsenic back in that Victorian era? Was it inheritance? A, inheritance. B, Riddex. Or C, white lace? Okay, so what was the nickname for arsenic back in that time period? Was it A, inheritance, B, Riddex, or C, white lace? That's our next question. So write it in your comments. What you think the answer is. So what are your guys' next projects? Let's just go go off a little bit and talk about like Rebecca. What's next on your list?
My next book is The History and Haunting of the Palace of Versailles. It is one of the only time or documented reports of a time warp where two deans from Oxford in 1909 walked through what they believed was a time warp and interacted with Marie Antoinette. But the majority of the book is the scandals, the poisons, everything that went on with Louis the 14th, 15th, 16th, Marie Antoinette. I have done a ton of research on this book. And then I'm doing the Winchester Mystery House, and I'm co-authoring
Oh,
that with Erica Mailman.
I love that. That's
And
great.
I'm partnering with with Barbara Bridgewater, who owns the John Proctor House in Salem. And we're going to
Oh,
be opening that to the public this year and doing special events.
nice. Let me know when that's happening because I want to make a trip to Salem. They had that museum
Okay.
there that I would like to visit, and
Okay.
of where they had the witch trials, and then I want to like scoot over to the Bordens. But yeah, let me know. That sounds awesome. Awesome. I'm excited for that. And Shelly, you said you're
Or I
working on a
turn,
new book.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get that out this spring, and it will be. I, I I couldn't contemplate doing these big books. Rebecca can just reel those off. These 900-page. That's daunting for me. But
Yeah.
this is. Uh, I'm going to do a book on once you've stayed at the Borden House. The title is The Fall River Guide to Lizzie Borden and Farther Afield. And
What
I
is it
have
called?
gone called, it'll be available on Amazon hopefully by June. It's called The Lizzie Borden Guide to Fall River and Farther Afield. And this is all of the places that have anything even remotely to do with Lizzie Borden. How to get there, pictures looking at, how they relate to her. Once you stay at the B&B, this is a travel book for people to go all around the area to things that are still there from Lizzie's time
Yeah.
and connected to the case and people in the case. It's been 28 years in the making.
Wow,
It's,
that's
it's
awesome. So, and I
so
want to, I just, like, I know the amount of research that goes into these books and the time. Like, it's not really about the writing, it's about the amount of research that goes into it. It's so time consuming. So, Rebecca, just tell me a little bit about your process, like how you go about doing all your research.
well,
Because I
before
got
I
hung
do
up
that,
on, well, go
I'd
ahead.
like to give a real big shout out to Shelly. Shelly, when I was researching the Lizzie Borden book, drove me all over Fall River and Swansea. That woman is a walking encyclopedia. I mean, she knows every single building that's there and that's no longer there. Cemetery, the cemetery she took me to, I will treasure. Woman, she's doing that book because I don't know of anybody that knows the area and the buildings and the history than she does. And my book would have been poorer had I not had her input. So, Shelley, I love you.
oh, thank you. We had a good time too on the road. I love to go on the road with Lizzie people. We have the best when the
We
COVID
do.
days.
And she showed me the best hot dog stand, too.
Know all the good
And
places.
Okay,
that's
so
really important.
it is
It's
important. No, my process is simple. I read every book I can find. And because you need to know the bones. And what would we do without people who hadn't come before us, right? And then I start hitting historical societies, newspaper archives. My main thing is no matter what I write about, I get the owner's permission. Which is really nice because they'll let me have access to tour guides and staff and to diaries and maps and documents that you wouldn't have access to. And I make sure they read it before it goes to print so that they're happy with how their venue has been represented. And that's really important to me.
I've learned a lot about online libraries since COVID, and not being able to go to do library research or something. I've discovered a lot of online libraries, which are pretty amazing.
The
Like,
Library
and
of Congress is huge, and I use it a lot.
yeah. But I run into trouble because I'm looking up something and then I see something else and get sidetracked all the time, like with information. It's like, damn, I
Yep.
don't want to know about that.
Same here. It's much easier now. When I started working on the Borden case, it was 1991, and you didn't have anywhere near the availability of material. I can stay home now and access a
Yeah.
lot of stuff on the computer. I don't know how many miles I've driven over, what is it, 28 years I've worked on this, but it's great that we have so much new technology, and look what we're doing here. I mean, I wouldn't
Yeah.
have dreamed could come to so many people. And one reason I built websites and all of that was to be able to share what I found out with other people, hear their ideas. What I miss most about working at Second Street are the guests that I have met over
Yeah.
the 18 years there, and I learn a lot from them. And we had so much fun doing little experiments and just
So
getting their feedback.
this is going to be a strange question. Um, what is, I'll go with Rebecca first. What is your best time of day for writing?
I actually start writing at 8 in the morning and write until 5 in the afternoon.
Okay.
That's I have really a set routine, and then in the evening I watch a murder mystery.
Of course you do.
Of course I do.
Yeah. And Shelly, what is your
I don't have a best time.
what is your
I'm a
best?
night, yeah, I'm a night owl. I do my best work between midnight and 2.
Okay.
And I
So
sleep late.
Wow.
yeah.
I'm impressed.
So
Yeah.
I'm a morning person. I get up at 4 in the morning and write till about 10 o'clock because then I have my whole day. But then I end up going to sleep at like 9 o'clock at night, which I think I'm on
Well,
farmer's hours.
oh, retirement is a blessing. When you're no longer working, you can set your hours. And I
Yeah.
find
Yep.
house is quiet, totally silent. That's when the wheels turn and I get productive.
So I want to put it out to our listeners. If they have any questions right now, would be a good time to type them in. If they wanted to talk about anything in specific about the case, we all know there's so much that a lot to do with the case. But if you have anything that you want to mention or talk about, okay. So I have, let's see, one more question. Okay, the last question we're going to ask is how many attempts were made by Lizzie to purchase prussic acid poison? Was it A, 1 time, B, 3 times, or C, 2 times? How many attempts were made by Lizzie Borden to purchase prussic acid? A, 1 time, B, 3 times, or C, 2 times? Okay, I also want to mention right now that all of us have websites or places where you could go. I know Shelly is Lizzie Borden warpsandwefts.com.
Yes, warps and wefts refers to the weave of a fabric. The wefts go from right to left, the warps go up and down, fall rivers based on textile economy. And I like the imagery of there's so many threads to this story, you can pull any one of them
It's
and
a
spend it.
massive website.
Yes.
It
Well,
really has a lot of information.
been around a long, yeah.
And Rebecca, you have a website. It's RebeccaPittmanBooks.com.
PittmanBooks.com. Rebecca F. PittmanBooks.com.
Okay. I
Shelley's
will put,
also an expert on the Titanic. I don't know if you know that.
what is that?
Shelley's also an expert on the Titanic.
Oh, maybe we should have another podcast. I'd love to learn about the Titanic.
I often
So
wondered what
She's
Lizzie thought of
amazing.
So the other, okay, the last thing I'm going to mention before we all sign off is the pop culture aspect of the Lizzie Borden case has grown immensely. And a part of that pop culture has been the paranormal aspect. Now, I know, like, Rebecca, you are, I think, involved in the paranormal aspect a lot with all of the things that you do, right? You write about the ghosts and what may be. But it has in the last few years grown as far as the Lizzie Borden case and people visiting and the whole paranormal teams coming in there. And I was involved with two, well, run by the same people, but I went there to experience that. I'll tell you, I'm a skeptic. And I thought it was interesting. It wasn't, it was part of a mock trial that I was more interested in, but I actually did experience something in the house, which I never, ever, ever thought would happen in a million years, which was I heard a baby cry. And it was at 1 o'clock at night, and they were doing EPV sessions, I think they're called, where Abby Borden was murdered. And I was out sitting on the landing, and I heard a baby cry. And it was recorded on tape. The guys that were running the paranormal session, I yelled in the room and I said, "Hey, did you hear that baby cry?" And he goes, "No." But when he played back the tape, it was on the tape. Which brought me to what we were talking about, the woman next door who killed her 2 children. You wrote an article about it, Down the Well. And that gave me the creeps so bad, because I didn't know about that story. So I was thinking, well, maybe it was one of her children. I don't know. It was just such a strange experience. And like I said, I'm a skeptic. So have any of you experienced any of that kind of thing?
Well, all of the books I write about, they're in the top 10 haunted places in America. There isn't any of them that I've been to that something didn't happen. Lizzie, the stories I got from the tour guides and the guests were prolific and what interested me was they repeated, they were repeat stories, which tends to give them credibility. A lot of voices were heard in the same places in the house, the steps on the staircase. I did not when I was there, but I was more interested in looking around and figuring out how I would write about it. I know the atmosphere is very thick, but as far as a pronounced paranormal thing, I didn't have while I was there.
So Douglas Lazaret wrote, I don't know if you caught it. He said screaming baby raccoons sound like babies crying. Screeching raccoons sound like babies crying. Like, okay. I don't know if there's any raccoons near the Borden house, but you know.
There is a parrot in the parking lot that came to the window, and this parrot has quite a repertoire. Who knows?
It's funny.
I like to quote Edith Wharton. I don't believe in ghosts, but I'm afraid of them.
Yeah, I'm like you. Don't put me in a dark cellar alone.
Well, I'm a skeptic like you, an extreme skeptic, and I've slept in every bedroom. I worked there for 18 years at night. And I've had to walk people, and they were terrified. When you arrive, you are predisposed to be frightened, and it's frightening. 2 head injuries, like 2 horrible murders, is terrifying. So you arrive predisposed to something. And I don't know. I mean, I don't have the answers to this.
Shelly, you're absolutely right, because every time I've ever been to the Borden house, I've always, like when I walked in the house, I've always felt a heaviness. And people have told me, "Oh, that's the ghosts." And I'm like, no, it's just the anxiety built around it of like, people talking about. They have a Ouija board there, for God's sake. Like,
was scary. And sometimes, I'd be waiting for guests to come back. I've been alone in the house many hundreds of hours. And I imagine I hear steps across, walking upstairs, walking across the floor. 99 times out of 100, I can find a reason. But there's that 1% that makes you go, I wonder. And murmuring sound, sometime like people are talking, the house is empty. So who's to say? I don't think I really want to know. It's kind of, I like a good ghost story. I'm a
Yeah.
skeptic, but I like a good ghost story.
Well, I'll tell you, at Limp Mansion, something kicked the bed and sat on my feet, and I heard gunshots, and I had witnesses for the
Wait.
gunshots and the dog bark.
That was
So
Winchester
Okay.
Mansion?
No, this was at Limp Mansion in St. Louis, and at Myrtle's Plantation, my earrings moved down the mantle. So
Okay, Rebecca.
I got no problem with ghosts.
I want to go with you. Things happen when you're
Okay.
I want to go with you. Road trip.
Road trip.
Okay, so we are going to answer the questions that I put out there. Okay, so the first question was whose inquest testimony went missing? A. Bridget Sullivan, B. Lizzie Borden and Bridget Sullivan's, or C. Lizzie Borden. Anyone want to answer that, Shelly?
Sullivan's testimony. I forget the name of the stenographer that took the notes. Was it Annie White? But the New Bedford newspaper and some of the other newspapers managed to piece together by their reporting what Bridget said. So we have a good idea of what was said, but the actual transcript is missing. Darn it.
So what answer was it?
It was A. Bridget Sullivan.
Yes, you
Yes.
are correct. All right, ding, ding, ding. Okay. So, and how old was Abby when she got married? A, 27, B, 37, or C, 47, Rebecca?
37.
Yes, she was a spinster. Okay.
Well, which is interesting because Lizzie was 32 during the trial, and Emma was 41 or 42,
Right.
and they were spinsters. So I find that interesting.
It's fascinating. Okay, so how many attempts were made by Lizzie to purchase prussic acid? A, 1 time, B, 3 times, C, 2 times. Shelly?
One time at the corner of South Main and Columbia at Smith's Pharmacy. Eli Bentz was there, and he inquired, "What do you need that for?" "It's dangerous poison. You need a doctor's prescription." And the lady replied, "I have moths in my sealskin sacks type of coat. And
I
want to
actually agree with you, but there was Rebecca thinks it's twice. Attempts that were recorded was 1, but Rebecca thinks it was twice, right?
I believe that it was Lizzie that went into one of to the Martell drugstore a few days before. And she went in first and asked for arsenic, and he said, he turned her down. He goes, "You're going to have to wait for my father to come back." She left, came back and said, "What about prussic?" And he said, "I can't sell that to you either." And then the one that Shelly just mentioned at Smith Drug. So I think there's 2.
Okay, well, Martell, he believed Martell at Pleasant Street Pharmacy. I never saw documentation for prussic acid. They traced that woman back to the wife of a policeman who was trying to buy the arsenic. She may have tried it. Yeah, she might have tried it. I would love to have been with Lizzie on that trip in New Bedford when she was staying with.
That whole trip to New Bedford is interesting because I think she slipped over to Fairhaven and saw Emma during that trip as well. And Emma admitted it on the stand and said, "Oh yeah, she did come see me Saturday." There was a lot going on during those 5 days in New Bedford.
Okay,
Yes.
so we'll give one time and two times we'll give the correct answer, and it's still a little up for debate, but that's okay.
Well, there's
Thus
one
is
doc.
Lizzie Borden. Okay, what in Alice Russell's inquest testimony determined whether there was even going to be a trial? She found a bat underneath the Borden bed. She saw Lizzie's burn address, or C, she thought Lizzie was guilty, and Shelly.
Oh, is it my turn?
Yes. Do you want me to?
Was it B? Was she saw Lizzie burning it?
Right. You are correct. Alice Russell, just for a note, did see a bat under the Borden's bed. She did see a bat
Yeah.
under there.
Well, Mr. Borden would keep that handy in case there was ever an intruder in the night. It's too bad he didn't have that bat on the sofa the morning of August 4th.
Yeah.
He did keep one in his bedroom. And I think Ethel was kind of startled because the bat handle kind of looked like maybe a handle. It's a long
Yes.
wooden, kind of gave her a jolt. Yeah. They have one there now, by the way. At 2nd Street, they keep one up in the bedroom.
Nice.
I love that.
Yes.
It's all about the detail.
Okay, and then the last one I think was, what was the nickname of arsenic back in that time period? Was it A, inheritance, B, Riddix, or C, white lace? Rebecca?
Back then, the inheritance poison because so many rich relatives were knocked off by arsenic.
Inheritance powder.
You
I
gotta
love that. I didn't know that. It's something I learned today. Thank you.
Inheritance powder. Also, they had something called rough on rat,
Give me the
which
can I have the bag?
kind of that
Yes.
stuff.
What is it
And you
called?
could rough on rats. It was a rat poison in a can, and it was very easy to obtain.
Yep.
I don't know that the Bordens maybe even had it.
Okay, so
Well,
I
when
am
you
going
think about
to
the
get.
fact,
That's fine. So the people that participated in this, I have a bag here. Every time they answered, we threw names in the bag. So I am going to pull out 3 names. And okay, the first one. Okay, let's just go in order. The first one will be for Rebecca's book, a haunting, the haunting of Lizzie Borden. Oh, the game.
actually,
I
it's
keep
for
forgetting the
Lizzie
game.
Borden paranormal card game.
Oh, I want that. So, okay, it's the Lizzie Borden paranormal card game. Okay, and the winner to that is it Paul Wolf? David Wolf. David Wolf. You won the paranormal card game. And I will be
Congratulations, David.
Congratulations. I will be writing to you for your address so we can get that out to you. Okay, the next one will be for Shelly's. What are you getting, Shelly?
I have 2. I have History of Oak Grove, but Borden related trade.
Oh,
And
okay.
Dressing Miss Lizzie paper doll set.
Oh, so 2 of them. Okay. Wow, thank you. So, oh, Larry, I can't read your handwriting. Wow, let me look this. Oh my God. David? Oh, it's is it, what is his that?
That's Omar.
Omar.
Avlies.
Oh, it's Omar. Let me go under the comments. Yeah, Omar Adule. Anyway, it's Omar. Kenny has your name, so we'll get your name and address. And then Kelly Hall won the paper doll, the dressing Miss Lizzie. Yay! Kelly, yay! And Omar. And then we got one more. Douglas. Oh. Douglas won my book. He already has a copy. Do we want to trade something? Can I give Kelly a copy of my book and Douglas a copy of your book, Shelly? Is that fair or no? I don't know. He has 2 copies of my book already.
Oh,
Douglas.
well, maybe he would like the history of Oak Grove.
Yeah, so why don't we do that? We'll give Douglas that, and then Kelly can get a copy of my book, Inadmissible. Yeah, all right. If you don't want that, then let me know. But that's what we're doing. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Yes.
Oh, and we have a copy of Rebecca, too.
What?
The History and Haunting of Lizzie Borden. We have a copy of that, right?
My comments aren't working, Kenny. Oh, Kelly, you have my book? Oh, wow. That's really exciting. All right. So, Kelly, do you have a copy of the paper, the doll dressing Lizzie? Douglas is saying he would love the dress up. All right. So let's work this out.
Just send me his
Oh my
address. I'll
goodness.
get-
I'm sorry. I didn't know we were going to run into this confusion. Okay. So Kelly, do you have the card game by any chance? Right. Okay. So David Wolf run the card game. So Douglas, you're gonna get a copy of the Oak Cemetery. Huh? Oh, he wants to dress up. Okay, the dress up. Kelly, I'm terrible at this. I'm really terrible at this. Kelly, do you have a copy of the Oak Grove Cemetery book?
It's all Borden related.
It's all Borden related. Oh, we're gonna fight over the doll book. Uh-oh.
I can do 2 copies of the dolls. Yeah.
Shelly, do you have a copy of my book?
I do not.
How about if we do this? I'll send you a personal copy of my book to you. You can send the dolls to I can't believe it's Kelly and Doug. So, and then Omar gets a David gets the card. And what did Omar get? The other book. Which
Oak
would
Grove
be
Cemetery.
okay. All right, we're good then. Oh my God. Let me not do this anymore. I feel so terrible. But okay, so that would be the trade-off. I'll be happy to send you a book, Shelly, and then Doug and Kelly. They just love it is a beautiful book, I have to say. I love it.
It really is. It's really well done.
And you're doing really yeah. And Rebecca, you're doing really well on your card game. I heard you're sold out of your
It's sold
card.
out twice. It's an $18.95 value, so it's actually a rummy style card game with all the actual evidence and crime scene photos. It's never the same game twice. And we're getting ready to do a big promo next month with a golden pair promotion. So stay tuned for that. You can win a free deck, and so look for that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I want to thank you both for taking the time out to do this. I really had a lot of fun, and I've learned a few things. We always learn a few things. And I want to ask if you guys would be interested in coming back and talk about some other topics.
I think that'd be fun.
The axe. We didn't get to a lot of things,
Yep.
you know, and you can talk about your new projects. I'm always supportive of artists and authors, and I like to give a shout out to. Doug said, "Oh, buy the card game too." Okay, great.
Well, you didn't say what your next project is, Canberra.
What's that?
You didn't say what your next project is.
Yeah, I'm always doing things. I'm part of a collective called at Hub 17. It's a place, it's an art gallery, a video studio. We do a lot of things out of here, and artists always come here with their projects. We do mini theater. It's just a collective of artists here. And my next project is going to be a collection of short stories. I'm sort of going off the side. I do have another grant that I'm proposing to a project I've always wanted to do, and it's called a podcast called I'm a Fan. And it's basically paying homages to all the people that I love, and I want to have them on the show. And they can bring, if they're a firefighter, if they're a nurse, if they're an artist, whatever. I just want to let them know that I'm a fan of theirs, and we can have a revolution of kindness. So that's one of the projects I'm working on, a podcast. And also, I'm a musician at heart, so I'm going to be doing a CD this year, another one. So,
Nice.
when you're an artist, you dibble dabble in everything.
Yes, you do. Well, and I would like to apologize for showing up in New Jersey, but I was at a Broncos game.
Hey, did they win? Did the Broncos win?
No, I don't know. I came over to do this. I was at a Broncos party, so I'm sorry I'm underdressed. Shelly, you guys look lovely, and I'm sitting here in New Jersey.
Oh no, it's quite all right. You know what? You showed up, and that's what counts, right?
I gave up my brat to be here. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for having me. I had a wonderful time.
Yeah, I had a great time too, and I look forward to all your books, all your stuff, and I hope to talk to you soon. And maybe, you guys can let us know if you want us to come back. All right, and I'll be in touch with you. We have our little group, so on Facebook that we talk in. And thank you so much. I hate to leave you because I love you guys, but it is what it is.
Well, we'll see you
Love
online.
you too.
Yes. All right.
Happy
Take
New
care,
Year.
everybody, and thank you for coming. And we'll be in touch. All righty.
All right.
Good night.
Bye.